Hello, this is David Everett from Smart Card News. Today we're very pleased to talk with Tim Jones. Tim, who's a co-director of the Centre for the Study of Financial Innovation, the CSFI, is going to talk to us about some of the new things that are happening in technology, things that are happening, if you like, because of the new technology. So Tim, over to you.
Most people expect me to talk about digital cash or mobile payments, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to talk about the most exciting book I've read in the last few years. It's called The Wealth of Networks, and it's by an American law professor called Yochai Benkler. The Wealth of Networks as a title has a bit of a familiar ring, doesn't it? Because it sounds a little bit like The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith's 18th century macroeconomic text, which basically laid the foundations for our understanding of the way capitalism and markets work. So Mr. Benkler is not a shrinking violet, or Professor Benkler is not a shrinking violet here. He wants to basically associate his book with a book of the stature of The Wealth of Nations. Benkler's not saying that Adam Smith was wrong. He's just saying that networks are so different from the way capitalism and business has operated in, if you like, the industrial age, say from 1700s through to the end of the last century, that we need to look again at the fundamentals and just check out that Adam Smith, if you like, says enough. Indeed, whether Smith is right all the time. Mostly, Benkler is saying Smith was right and is right. It's just that networks add a further layer of opportunity, and that further layer needs to be explained, needs to be understood, needs to be taken account of. So there are some very, very core things that underpin Benkler's analysis, and I think he's basically right, and I think it's a very powerful and it's a very uplifting book. The first thing he says is that if you think back to the industrial age, we tended to operate through companies, and companies got larger and larger. And that's because a lot of things that were made had to be made using capital equipment if you wanted to make them cheaply enough. And the capital equipment was expensive, so you bought your Arkwright spinning jenny. You had to buy a factory to put in it. You employed people to work it. You then employed marketing people and sales agents and all the rest of it that goes to make up a company. Whereas in the networked economy, actually, if you swarm together a bunch of people with a networked PC each and some time and some energy and creativity, look what you can do. You can make Google, you can make Yahoo, you can make PayPal, you can make eBay. You can make things of major macroeconomic effect by pooling together a whole load of mini-capitalists, if you like, who are just bringing themselves and a networked PC to the party. And that is fundamentally different in terms of what can be achieved. So if that's the first difference, is that all? No, there's lots more. And the second difference takes us to Mr. Maslow. Now, for those of you who have done psychology, you'll know about Mr. Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. And that basically starts at the bottom, where we all need to be sort of warm and fed and healthy. There's a bit about sex in the middle. And then towards the top of Maslow's hierarchy, then it's all about self-actualizing, making of our lives what we wish to make of our lives. And so Benkler says, look at all this networked PC capability that's around. Look at the wealth that's been created by individuals in their lives. And look at the disposition of time they've got between the time they devote to their job, if you like, and the time they devote to their leisure. Let's go back to this fundamental that we can swarm networked PCs and we can do stuff that's material with that. Benkler then says, look, in the industrial age, if you wanted to be kind of, helpful, altruistic, to put something back and all the rest of it, you tended to do it as, somebody doing something for a neighbour, doing something within your family, that kind of local, personal contribution. But what he's saying is, look now, in the networked economy, you can actually make a contribution that, when shared with the contributions of perhaps millions of other people, can again have significant macroeconomic effect. And probably the earliest examples were the screensaver sharings, the SETI at home, things like that, where people allowed their spare computer cycles to be hijacked by a distant computer, and clever mathematicians split a very large task, whether it was scrolling through lots of data from space looking for extraterrestrial intelligence, that's what SETI does, or whether what folding at home does. Folding at home is all about proteins folding. and it's the maths associated with understanding how proteins operate. That's been split up into lots of little tasks and then distributed over many thousands of computers. But a more recent example is Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an extremely successful internet encyclopedia. It's free. It's a massive and wonderful growing resource in many, many languages. And it is created by all of us. It is created by thousands of people working together to create the content that is at Wikipedia. In the early days of the internet, people said, "Ah, humbug, these things will never work because if you allowed thousands of people to put in articles, they'd be rubbish, and how could you ever rely on it?" And one of the things that has surprised, I think, everybody with the speed and the sophistication with which they've developed is the reviewing techniques and the normative techniques, if you like, that put things right in something like Wikipedia when they go wrong. So that now Wikipedia is generally viewed as being among the best encyclopedias, whether they're for free or whether they're paid for. So this is kind of getting to be a bit interesting now, because if you think about Wikipedia, let's imagine we tried to do it as though it were a business, and we were going to pay all of those contributors a going rate, and we were going to try to monetize that by charging people for access. Do you think that'd be a business case for Wikipedia? I don't. And that's really the nub of it. Things with significant macroeconomic effect can now happen because of the voluntary disposition of resources by people who just want to, because it's doing for themselves something a far way up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that can have such macroeconomic effects that it can take out significant competitors. A number of other online encyclopedias haven't made it because of Wikipedia. And it can create massive quantities of wealth. And really what Benkler is saying is, increasingly as we go forward, with an ageing, more wealthy, more technically literate population, isn't what we've seen so far with the wikis just the very beginning of a phenomenon where more and more the winning competitive entry to a marketplace isn't going to be something that obeys the old rules of being from a standard corporation, but it's much more likely to combine elements of the old world with elements of the new world of voluntary activity, what Benkler calls social production. I think the last thing I'll talk about Benkler's ideas is the old idea about intellectual property. I've been around the block a few times on patents and going to the patent office, lodging patents and trying to protect them and seeing how all of that is done. And what Benkler says is that actually it really is time to challenge the received wisdom on intellectual property. And that the notion of what's called the copyleft or OpenGL approach, where when you create a piece of intellectual property, you don't make it private, you make it public, but on the basis that the people who use it themselves, whatever they add to it is also made public. That which underpins Linux, the operating system and associated software environment, or the open source world if you like, that is, in his view, the way to create more value than if you protect IPR in the traditional patented way. Now, we've seen some very interesting and some very high-profile cases recently. Last year there was the RIM-BlackBerry case, which got settled for a very large amount of money. And just very recently, with the launch of iPhone, it's been reported that Cisco have taken Apple to court over the use of the name iPhone. So the old world of intellectual property protections is alive and well. And Benkler again is saying, look, this is an and, it's not an or. Benkler says, of course we still need intellectual property protections, we still need to own our houses, our cars, so it's not that we're going to throw away the concept of personal property, for example. But he is saying that if you compare the world of Linux and all the open source software, and all the capability that is growing there, and compare that with a closed world of proprietary software, Benkler is making a powerful case that the open source software world will win, that not protecting it is the winning strategy, because you end up with this massive corpus of intellectual property that you can add to, that you can use all of without worrying about the next patent lawyer and the next patent infringement action or trademark or copyright infringement action. It's a powerful and compelling argument, and one that deserves our attention. It's also a very uplifting argument for development, because of course the whole of this corpus of knowledge, whether it's on Wikipedia or whether it's the software in open source, can be utilised by anybody across the world, and that can bootstrap up people around the world in less developed economies in very exciting ways. So I recommend you all go out and read Yochai Benkler's The Wealth of Networks.